When states start regulating and, taxing capital at a really aggressive rate, do businesses and taxpayers inevitably just vote with their feet?
Well, yeah.
Does it trigger some kind of economic self-destruct sequence?
I think we're past the point of it being a theoretical debate. It's a measurable, massive migration pattern happening, right now.
And if you look at the flight paths between the West Coast and, say, the American interior, the answer seems to be a pretty resounding yes.
Exactly.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to look past the political noise, maybe past the simple anecdotes, and really examine the cold, hard statistics that are driving this huge interstate economic shift.
We're talking about the California exodus.
The California exodus to lower tax havens, most notably, of course, Texas. We've collected corporate statements, IRS migration data, and some really detailed tax reports.
And the opening news hook for this, it really defines the stakes, doesn't it?
It really does.
We can start with a 50-year-old California food company, Cacique Foods. They just celebrated the completion of their move to North Texas.
50 years in California.
50 years. And the company stated its primary drivers were logistics citing easier shipping and just a dramatically more favorable business environment overall.
And Cacique isn't some lone example, right? This isn't just one company slipping away.
No, not at all. This echoes major strategic shifts by, massive corporate giants. We're talking about Chevron moving its headquarters to Houston.
And the tech heavyweights.
Oh.
Oracle, Tesla.
Oracle and Tesla, yeah. They've either moved their corporate headquarters or, significantly expanded their core manufacturing and admin functions right into Texas.
It's the definition of a stampede.
It really is. And what's fascinating here is the stark economic contrast this capital flight is creating.
Right.
California's economy, it's huge, but it recently experienced recessionary conditions in 2022 and early 2023.
And that sluggish growth, when you compound it with losing all those high-income taxpayers, that's got to be hitting the state budget hard.
Hitting it very hard. California is now projecting a record-breaking $68 billion deficit for the next fiscal year.
$68 billion. That is a staggering hole.
It's a massive hole. Meanwhile, the state that everyone's fleeing to, Texas, it's just booming.
Okay, so what are the numbers there?
Texas's real GDP grew by a robust 9.2% over the last 8 quarters.
9.2. And what was California's growth over that same period?
A paltry 1.5%.
Wow.
That gap, that just illustrates the fundamental difference, doesn't it? It's economic speed versus regulatory friction and cost.
And that difference is the essence of this deep dive.
Right. We're looking into the sources to understand what that friction, that heavy regulatory anchor is actually made of and why capital is finding it so unsustainable.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our sources, they clearly show companies are not leaving California for, change of scenery.
Not for the sunshine, no.
The primary reasons they state for this massive corporate move, it all boils down to money, cost, and complexity.
It's an environment that just makes it incredibly hard to stay profitable, especially if you're operating on a national scale.
That's absolutely right. When you hear from people on the ground, they're talking about regulatory overload. Logistics, for instance.
A huge one. The CEO of Cacique Foods talked specifically about how hard it was to ship their food products to their expanding markets, especially on the East Coast.
From California.
From their old base in California. Moving to Central Texas made that whole distribution process way easier.
And that one small factor, shipping speed, that's actually a massive financial advantage when you're at that scale.
Oh, absolutely. Every day you save in transit, every dollar you cut in transport costs, it adds up to billions across the corporate landscape.
But the pain goes far beyond just logistics, right?
It does, especially for small businesses. They report that the state's laws are so difficult to interpret, so constantly in flux, that they're facing crazy levels of HR fees.
And these aren't fees for services, are they?
No, these are fees just to hire consultants to make sure you're complying with the ever-changing laws.
That complexity, it sounds paralyzing. It's not just the fine you might pay, it's the uncertainty.
Exactly. You can't plan, you can't invest or grow when the rules of the road are constantly being rewritten under your feet.
And that's why some describe the environment as oppressive.
Precisely. We have a great example tied directly to investment. Carl's Jr. Hardee's, the fast food chain, they just stopped opening stores in California.
Why?
The permitting process, getting the go-ahead to build, just took way too long. They said permit approval takes under 90 days in Texas.
And in California.
The timelines were just prohibitive. So that bureaucratic friction, It's directly throttling job creation.
And we can't talk about the regulatory state without getting into the tax structure that holds it all up. California has the country's highest top marginal income tax rate.
At a punitive 13.3%.
It is a huge slice of personal income right off the top.
And it doesn't stop there. When you factor in all the local taxes and fees, California has the 5th highest overall tax burden in the nation. So it's high taxes plus complex compliance.
A tough combination to maintain long-term profitability with.
Let's delve deeper into one specific area here. Labor laws. Our sources highlight several regulations that business owners have called, and I'm quoting here, asinine.
That kind of language from people making these decisions, it tells you how deep the frustration runs.
It really does. A perfect example is the mandatory payout of accrued vacation time when an employee quits.
Which isn't required in Texas.
Not required in Texas. It forces California businesses to keep this constantly ticking liability on their books. It just increases operating expenses with zero corresponding increase in productivity.
And then there's the big one, the high-profile push for higher minimum wages, like the recent $20 fast food wage.
Right. And while the goal is, a higher living standard, the immediate response from the business operators is what's so interesting to us here.
They raise prices.
They raise prices, and they immediately increase calls for automation to offset that new labor cost.
And that's backed up by economic history, isn't it?
It is. We reviewed studies on this. A review of 3 decades of research found that nearly 80% of studies suggest negative employment effects, job loss, reduced hours from minimum wage hikes.
And that hits the entry-level workers the hardest.
Especially hard. Those with no work experience who really need those initial lower-cost jobs to get a start.
And the news reports now, on the ground, they confirm it. Employees are worried about losing hours, and consumers are facing much higher menu prices.
So the cost is either eliminated through a robot or it's just passed down entirely to the consumer. The anchor is just too heavy.
Which brings us to where the story gets really, really compelling. The people are leaving right alongside the businesses.
That's the critical point.
It's not just a corporate decision. It's a mass exodus of taxpayers.
And the scale is just staggering. A reported 818,000 Californians left the state in 2023 alone.
818,000.
And a 2023 poll showed that a massive 40% of the people still there were actively considering moving out. It's a powerful collective economic vote.
And they're voting specifically against the state's policies. When you ask them why they're leaving.
It's the cost of living.
High cost of living, cited by 61%. And significantly, state laws inconsistent with their political views, cited by 27%.
So people are rejecting the high-tax, high-regulation model en masse.
And this isn't a light decision because moving is incredibly expensive. The median out-of-state move from California is over 1,500 miles.
But you don't even need academic reports for this. You just have to look at the U-Haul rental market.
Okay, this U-Haul anecdote, it's a true economic indicator.
It is.
We found that renting a 26-foot U-Haul from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles cost just $719.
Right, because that's the direction the trucks want to go, to return to a high-demand area.
But the reverse trip, from LA to Salt Lake City.
It's an astronomical $3,811.
Wait, that's more than 5 times the price?
5 times. And that's due entirely to the chronic truck shortage in California because the flow of people and their stuff is overwhelmingly one way out.
That fee isn't an accident. It's a direct physical manifestation of the economic drain happening every day.
And the sources draw a very direct line between this migration and tax policy.
Let's look at the national picture, say, from 2020 to 2023.
Okay. The 10 states with the highest taxes, they collectively lost 2.3 million residents to interstate migration.
And on the flip side,
the 10 states with the lowest taxes gained 2.1 million residents in that same period.
the symmetry is just.
Yeah.
It's undeniable. It confirms people are following the dollars.
Exactly. When we analyzed 21 major migration flows, we found that in 86% of those pairings, the destination state had a lower tax burden.
86%. That's an overwhelming pattern.
And it gets even more predictive when the tax difference is large. If the difference in tax collection between 2 states is more than 3% of GDP,
The probability just skyrockets.
skyrockets. 63.8% of moves go directly to the lower tax state.
And this leads us to the loss of wealth that California is seeing. The state is hemorrhaging taxable income.
In 2021 alone, California lost nearly $30 billion in net taxpayer income to other states. That money is now funding services and growth somewhere else.
And it's not just everyone leaving, it's the highest earners who are leading the charge.
That's the key. The data shows that those earning over $200,000 are disproportionately leaving. For this top bracket, low-tax states see a 19.5% difference in the share of inbound moves minus outbound moves.
So when your wealthiest residents leave, the state's fiscal health just takes a massive hit.
Right. So let's turn the conversation to the destination, Texas. It has consciously designed its system to be the economic and regulatory antithesis of a state like California.
Which raises the question, what specific incentives are luring these massive investments? It can't just be a low-tax label.
No, there are fundamental structural differences, and it starts with clarity and predictability. Texas has no individual income tax.
And, crucially, no corporate income tax.
Correct. Instead, it uses a franchise tax, which is based on margin.
Okay, let's pause there because it's a key distinction. What does a margin tax actually mean? How is it different?
Well, a corporate income tax is usually on your net income, your profit after all costs are deducted. The Texas franchise tax is levied on a company's gross receipts minus certain specific deductions, like cost of goods sold or compensation.
So it's more predictable.
Much more predictable for the state, and it can be lower for certain businesses, especially manufacturers. It's a massive competitive advantage. Texas's state and local taxes per $1,000 of personal income is $86.
Compared to the U.S. average.
Which is $107.
Yeah.
Much higher.
And beyond that baseline structure, local governments are being really aggressive, giving, as the sources say, huge tax breaks to bring in headquarters.
It's a targeted, deliberate strategy of economic warfare. It absolutely is.
So what are these programs?
Well, you have the Texas Enterprise Fund, or TF. This is a fund used to attract new business with performance-based awards that can range from $1,000 to $10,000 per qualified job created.
So that's just cash on the table for creating employment.
It is. They're not just relying on low taxes. They are actively partnering to reduce the cost of entry for large employers.
And sweetening the deal.
Exactly. And they offer specific tax relief just for moving. The relocation deduction lets companies deduct costs for moving inventory, computers, and supplies from their initial franchise tax filing.
It's a financial welcome mat.
That's a great way to put it. And they're also helping manage property taxes, which can be a big local hurdle for large-scale projects.
Right.
That's where the Texas Jobs, Energy, Technology, and Innovation Act comes in. It lets school districts cap the taxable value of a property for 10 years, which is a huge benefit for these massive projects in energy or manufacturing.
It gives them long-term predictability.
Which is exactly what an investor wants. Finally, let's go back to workforce costs.
Yep.
Texas's environment here is also intentionally less restrictive. The biggest difference is workers' compensation.
It's not mandatory.
It is not mandatory in Texas, and this results in dramatically lower costs. In 2021, employer costs for this program were 41 cents per $100 of wages in Texas.
Damn nationwide.
$1.01. So that's a 60% saving on a core operating expense.
And instead of just eliminating regulations, they're backing it up with state-funded training programs to make sure the labor supply is skilled.
That's the smart, proactive approach. They manage the supply side of labor. They have things like the Skills Development Fund, the Lone Star Workforce of the Future Fund. They're actively investing state money to lower operating costs and guarantee access to a skilled labor pool.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Well, the data shows a direct, powerful relationship between aggressive state taxation and regulation and this mass migration of job creators and high-income earners.
Yeah, the regulatory environment in a state like California, it's creating this heavy, costly anchor that businesses just can't afford to drag.
While states like Texas are offering intentional economic speed and flexibility.
And this migration, it hits the wealthy hardest in terms of pure revenue loss, but the impact is really felt by everyone who stays behind.
Through reduced job creation, fewer opportunities.
And ultimately, massive destabilizing budget deficits, like that $68 billion shortfall projected in California. The money and the people are voting against excessive state control and for economic freedom.
And this brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. Our sources highlight how states collect revenue. The biggest source is property tax, then sales tax, then income taxes. But crucially, Corporate income taxes account for just 3% of total state and local revenue.
Just 3%. So if the desire for zero income tax, both personal and corporate, is the main driver of this massive exodus?
Will high-tax states eventually be forced to shift their tax burden even more onto property and sales taxes?
And if that happens, those taxes disproportionately penalize the middle and working class residents who remain, which could ultimately just make the state's economic cycle even worse.
Something to consider as these powerful economic currents continue to redefine the map of American opportunity.